Shalom. This week we are reading Parashat Reeh in the book of Deuteronomy, which really begins in chapter 11 and verse 26. And this is the portion of the blessing. God tells us, "See, I present before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing that you will listen to the commandments of Hashem, your God, that I command you today, and the curse if you do not listen to the commandments of Hashem, your God, and you stray from the path." And there's a lot of very amazing things in this portion. There's one thing that I'd like to dwell on. It's a very unusual verse, unusual concept. We find at the very beginning of chapter 14, we find the following verse. "You are children to Hashem your God. You shall not cut yourselves, and you shall not make a bald spot between your eyes for a dead person. For you are a holy people to Hashem your God, and Hashem has chosen you for himself to be a treasured people from among all the peoples on the face of the earth." What's amazing about this verse is what it says and the context in which it's said. And of course, we're talking here about a concept that is really quite pagan, that various peoples would inflict bodily injury upon themselves, lacerate themselves, mutilate themselves in response to dealing with death, the death of a loved one, passing of someone very close. They would, as it were, punish themselves, take it out upon themselves. And in a way, we can understand this kind of reaction because there's nothing as wrenching and as difficult and as challenging to a person's spiritual balance. It's nothing that places him in such an existential dilemma like confronting death. And so some people would really just out of maybe anger, frustration, a total feeling of vulnerability and floating with the universe and being disconnected from God, the source of life, people would mutilate their own bodies. And here in this verse, Hashem is telling us, you're different, you are a holy people, you are a treasured people, you must not do this. What's really unusual about this verse is it's the only verse in the whole Torah where God actually tells us, you are children to the Lord your God. I mean, we know that we're children. We know that this is a concept that we speak about a great deal in the prayer services. We know that we sometimes come to God as our Father, sometimes as our King, and we want to feel that Hashem is our Father. But this is actually the only verse where Hashem says outright, don't do this, because you are children to Hashem your God. And how amazing it is that it's specifically here in the warning, in the exhortation that God gives us not to take it out on ourselves physically when someone dies, not to damage ourselves, not to mutilate our bodies. Hashem says, why? Because you are children to the Lord your God. What an amazing idea. There's a lot going on here. And what it really has to do with the whole concept spiritually of our need to be connected to Hashem and our need to understand really the purpose of life. There's so much here. And again, it's such a challenge for a person to deal with the loss of a loved one because it thrusts a person into a situation where we're thinking, well, what is life? What am I? Is this what it's all about? I feel so alone. And God forbid, if we take the worst case scenario, the classic example in Torah of a first-degree mourner is, God forbid, a child who's mourning for his father feels abandoned. The person feels such a terrible sense of deprivation and loss. How can I go on? I feel so much conflict that he might take it to such an extent of just making a permanent mark in himself, a constant mourning. I can never get over this. I am going to be constantly at a loss. I can never see past this. And it becomes anger, and it becomes a mechanism of self-destruction for one to actually deface one's own body over this. Such an extreme. We can identify and understand where this feeling is coming from, but Hashem is saying, wait, you're going too far. Because maybe you have lost, God forbid, a father, but you still have me. I am your father. I am your father. So you have lost your physical father in the micro of your physical existence. But the bond that we have, Hashem says, you're part of me. And that goes on forever. And Hashem is really choosing this instance of this idea, which maybe is referring to a pagan rite, but also we can see today that people also can become so totally alone, and they can feel themselves to be so totally separated from Hashem that they don't know how to go on in the face of loss. And Hashem is saying, wait, you still have me. I am your father. And put it in perspective. And put it in proportion. And in the very face of the worst calamity that a person as a human being can undergo, separation and the whole cataclysmic brush with death as a survivor, and we see that it doesn't go on forever, and we have to deal with mortality and with our own limitation. That could be such a great test for a person, such an awesome test for a person, where we might prove that we don't really have the connection to Hashem. We might cut ourselves off by demonstrating this loss of a feeling of purpose. But Hashem is saying, wait, there is a continuum, and you are still connected to forever. You're still connected to the source of life, to the divine Shekhinah. And remember, Banim atem laHashem Elokecha. You are children to Hashem your God, to the living God. So don't make that mark, and don't take it out upon yourselves, and don't show that anger, and don't show that lack of self-restraint and that self-indulgence in that feeling of morbidity and vulnerability in the face of your mortality. No. The truth is that we go on forever. You are children to the one true God.